The third phase of elections in Jammu and Kashmir is going to take place in the shadow of terror. After the multiple terror attacks that have taken place in 3 different parts of the Kashmir Valley, from north to south to central, all eyes are also on the Prime Minister's first rally in the valley on Monday. How do our armed forces assess the situation on the ground, especially the audacious attack on an army camp in Uri near the line of control? Joining me now is, of course, the Army Commander of the Kashmir Valley, the General Officer Commanding of the 15th Corps, General Saha. Thanks for your time, sir. I know it's a tense and delicate time, but I must first ask you to share with us some more details, since you've had a day now to assess what happened, how did this attack on the army camp happen. First, let me start by asking you, do we have an assessment of when these terrorists came in, when they infiltrated?
Well, before I come to the specific, operation that you referred to, first of all, I think we got to view the whole thing in correlationship with a whole lot of other events that have taken place in the past month and a half.
Yes.
So, in that, the first thing that I want to highlight is the number of, senior conferences, meetings of senior political leaders, military leaders, terrorist leaders across. There was a certain spate in those which obviously we were keeping track of.
Across the border in Pakistan.
And much of it was also reported in the media. So, if you saw the trend that emerged, surely there were some designs that were coming out quite clearly.
So, you're joining the dots between the kind of political activity you've seen in Pakistan on the other side of the border and the terror attacks here.
Yeah. The next thing is, you see, we had a ceasefire violation here in Kashmir, which by and large was remaining pretty stable, until barring an odd incident here and there, which was being dealt with appropriately. So, we had this ceasefire violation on the 8th of November, where unfortunately that 17-year-old girl in Kamalkot, she died because of the rocket fire, and we lost a soldier too. And the intercepts and some of the communications that came thereafter, it was pretty evident it was being directed from the top.
When you say directed from the top, what do you mean?
Well, quite clearly there is a design and there are directions on which it was not a typical irritant on the line of control which kind of caused that conflagration for sure. So, when it is not an irritant from bottom up, it is something top down. And the next thing which I want to bring out is, we had a series of recovery of IEDs, improvised explosive devices in the Tangdhar sector, in fact on 3 occasions, on 10th, 15th and 27th November, and all of them are pretty dangerous ones. So, one thing that came out was, yes, there is an attempt to push in these IEDs because that could have been, actually disastrous. And
so, there's a larger pattern.
And those IEDs incidentally were recovered based on int that we got from one of our sister agencies. So, it was a collective effort. The other point which I want to bring out, again around the 3rd week of November, if you recollect, there was this massive consignment of 18 brand new AK-47 and 6 pistols which were recovered, again, trying to push it in. So, if you see one after the other events were happening, then of course, the recent incidents that you talk about.
Is it a recent infiltration or is it an old infiltration?
Well,
these terrorists who have attacked the army camp?
Yeah, this is very much a recent infiltration.
By recent, you mean the last few days?
Yes, of course. And the other thing is, there are 2 infiltrations that took place in quick succession. One was on the night of 1st, 2nd December, which happened in the Tutmari Gali sector, in which 6 terrorists were killed, bang on the Samshabadi, the ridge line, and the other one which took place between night of 4th and 5th. So, my sense is this infiltration would have taken place a day previous, because there are some ground activities which suggest that it had taken place the night previous.
Are you able to assess what the staging launch pad for these infiltrators may have been?
Well, the terrorist camp locations are pretty well known, across, and the other thing is there's known staging camps are also known. So, our sense is these are the staging camps which are along the Jhelum river, which are there. So, they have been launched from there, and if you see the lateral distance between the 2 operations, it clearly suggests a pattern and a design which is there.
So, you are saying, and this is very important, General Saha, you are saying there is a clear Pakistan imprint on the multiple terror attacks that have taken place in the Kashmir Valley?
Well, of course, I'm sure you've seen the recoveries that have been made, the markings, they're all absolutely new. I mean, the food packets are, of course, they have the markings of manufacture at various places in Pakistan, and they are as recent as November 2014.
That recent?
Yes, yes. And the ammunition which you saw, those red colored LG game ammunition with the shotguns, They are made of, I think, a company called Shaheen. You can, I mean, you've seen them all. All of it is very much alive, and there is hardly any doubt that it is from across.
So there is direct evidence to link Pakistan to these terror attacks?
Absolutely, I mean, unambiguous.
And when you say that these instructions are coming from top down, are you referring to state actors or non-state actors in Pakistan?
Well, why do we say that this is driven top down? Because A, there is nothing on the line of control or no such irritant which could have caused a spiral upwards. And that there is a very distinct pattern, you know, through the series of events which I told you. So obviously there are directions from top, and those directions are driven by, I think, a clearly articulated design.
And the top, do you mean the Pakistani army? Do you mean the ISI? Do you mean terror groups like the Lashkar-e-Taiba? Do you mean Hafiz Saeed? Who do you mean when you say the top?
So quite clearly, one does not happen without the other. So there is a nexus of sorts that operates, and which one is the predominant player at a given point of time, that quite clearly depends on the circumstances, and so all of it depends in conjunction with a whole lot of activities that are happening, elections as you talk about over here. Then we are also seeing the kind of, you know, meetings that have taken place. For instance, the one that took place in Lahore, I think.
Hafiz Saeed, India's most wanted mastermind of 2611.
The 2-day one, the media has reported extensively. In fact, today's media has called it mainstreaming terrorism. So, I mean, it's all there out in the open sources.
So, you are saying that the recoveries from the slain terrorists show an unambiguous link to Pakistan in terms of food packets having been manufactured in Pakistan, and the ammunition and weaponry also bearing the imprints of Pakistan manufacturing? Let me ask you, do you believe this is the backlash to the turnout that we have seen in the first two phases? That because this time we haven't seen the boycott calls working in the way that they did. Are we seeing terror groups hitting back? Are we seeing then Pakistan hitting back?
See, the kind of efforts that the security forces have put in to ensure peaceful elections, I think, has been phenomenal. And it was a very, very coordinated effort. It all started with a core group meeting, for instance, for Kashmir, that we had in our headquarters. Core group, as you know, is an established mechanism in which all of us come together, the JKP, the CRPF, BSF, all security elements, so to say, and as much as the intelligence elements, we all came together, worked it out, and we went down on the ground. District levels, sub-district level coordination meetings have been carried out and supervised very closely by all of us, and clearly that kind of security was unprecedented. This kind of coordinated security apparatus is unprecedented. The kind of techniques used for surveillance, for example, unprecedented. Then you know, the resource mobilization that was done to make sure that as the phases progress, we have enough security. So quite clearly this must have unnerved, you know, established methods of functioning, hence an element of desperation, and hence, you know, such a sinister design to try and disrupt.
Are you concerned about two important events that are imminent? The Prime Minister's first rally in the valley in Srinagar, and of course the third phase of polling. Two of these attacks took place in areas that have to vote on Tuesday, Uri and Tral. Are you concerned that these terrorists have succeeded in creating an environment of fear? Are you concerned about the security situation, because intel suggests that there will or there could be more such attempts to disrupt the polls?
Yeah, see, first of all, I must you know, say that our boys have done a great one. Really, I'm proud of them. The fact that the security grid has succeeded is established by the point that they did not succeed in getting at the populated areas. You know, the area where this operation took place, for example, how populated all of it is. The complete road from Baramulla to Uri is highly populated now, and for the kind of sacrifice and for the kind of bravery which has been shown by the soldiers, by the elements of the security grid, it has been ensured that there have been no loss of innocent lives. To that extent, the security grid has very much succeeded. Now, talking about well, concern, obviously there are concerns, obviously there are challenges. And
does intelligence, do your intelligence input suggest that there is more trouble ahead?
All that I wish to
not to create alarm, of course.
All that I wish to tell you is the security grid is very much in place, and we are absolutely prepared to respond to any challenges that emerge.
Questions have been raised about the vulnerability of the army camp, about whether you need to recalibrate, how many tiers of security and how many tiers of defenses you actually have. So do you believe that there had been a certain kind of relaxation that had set in because militancy levels had come down and this will have to be reviewed again, sir?
See, first of all, I must tell you that the purpose of the security grid, the counter-terror or the counter-infiltration security grid, is to ensure that civilian targets are not affected.
Yeah.
It is to ensure that there is no loss of innocent lives.
Yes.
And that is being done to its fullest. In the process, because of circumstances, because of occasions, because of how the operations, pan out in a sense, at times we are paying a huge price. But as long as we are succeeding in keeping the civilians secure, I think the security grid is doing its job.
In a way, you're literally taking the bullet to make the ballot possible.
Yeah, you put it very nicely.
Sir, let me ask you though to step back and look at the larger situation. There have been demands from the regional parties here that the security situation, prior of course to these attacks, had improved enough for a relook at the Armed Forces Special Powers Act. The army of course feels strongly that this cannot be the case. So are you concerned that this is very much part of the electoral discourse here? Like you said, you're enabling democracy, but in the democratic discourse here, the Armed Forces Special Powers Act is a very emotional issue.
Well, in the present circumstances, I would think it would be very inappropriate for me to comment on this, because obviously my views would be professional. Yes. And your question quite clearly is political. But
you are, if we see the kind of verdict that we saw, for example, in the Machil encounter, subsequently the proceedings have begun in the Badgam boys case as well, in which 2 teenagers were killed. Clearly there is an attempt to say that the system can work when it goes wrong. Would it be correct to say that the army is trying to send out the message that if there is wrongdoing, we do take action?
I don't think the army does anything to send out messages. It is, whatever it does, it is driven by professional judgment and correct, legal action. So our actions are quite clearly driven by those.
I want to take you back to what happened in Uri. Talk a little bit about the kind of weaponry and ammunition and scale of these attacks, because it's clear that there was a coordination. It's clear that there are dots that have been connected. So what is the kind of weaponry that your men had to deal with? How armed were these terrorists?
See, in both these infiltration attempts, night 1st, 2nd and night of 3rd, 4th, in both the cases there were 6 AK-47 each. That was the primary weapon. And the one that happened in Uri, in addition to the 6 AK-47, there were 2 shotguns, which was a new kind of an introduction, if you will. And the quantity of ammunition in both the cases was phenomenal. The Uri one, for example, per person he was carrying 10 magazines, and each magazine, has 300 rounds. All in all, the number of rounds that were not fired that have been recovered is, if my figures are right, it's 1462.
Wow.
So that is the kind of figures we are talking about here, and likewise a similar number of rounds when it comes to the shotguns. Then talking about the grenades, almost every person was carrying 10 grenades. So that is the extent, and the number of GPSs, radio sets, ICOM, 1 mobile phone, of course. So like this, and if you see the food also, they were carrying enough food of different, variety. So all in all, really the kind of ammunition that they carried, the kind of food which they carried, they could have clearly lasted out for days. I mean, it goes to the credit of these soldiers on the ground who were able to, knock it off so soon and get control of the situation in what, less than 12 hours.
And you do have enough evidence to show that these were coordinated attacks in 3 different parts of the valley. And do you believe these were synchronized? And do you believe, as you've said, they were synchronized from across the border?
Yeah, see, what happens is when you see IEDs being pushed from the Tangdhar side, you see such a large consignment of weapons being pushed from the Keren side. Then in Tutmari Gully, what is happening? A massive operation with this, such heavily armed people. And if you see their clothing pattern, they were all dressed in those whites, ready to get across the snow. And then you come further south in the Uri sector, the quantum of ammunition I have told you. How can it be uncoordinated, happening all in a series of 1 month, which can quite clearly get, extrapolated backwards to the conferences, meetings, etc. that I spoke about.
Across the border.
So obviously there is an element of coordination, and indeed very fine coordination, good synchronization that we are seeing here.
Last question, sir. What is the message you would send out? We still have crucial phases of the elections left, and as we've said, you have enabled the ballot by literally your men taking the bullet, and of course the country owes a massive gratitude to our soldiers. But what is the message you send at this time about the security situation on the grounds? We are seeing violence spike because it's election season. What's the message you're sending out to the voters of Jammu and Kashmir?
Well, continue to provide the secure environment that is required for carrying out the rest of the electoral process, the rest of the democratic process, as indeed carry on providing security to the people of Kashmir, irrespective of what it costs to do that.
Your men have been real heroes. Thank you so much, General Saha. Pleasure talking to you.
Thank you.